Welcome to the channel, everybody. In today's tutorial video, we are going to be covering the subject of agriculture. So if you've ever wanted to grow your own food in the unreal world, or even provide yourself with a source of sustainable healing herbs, then agriculture is the skill you're going to want to take a look at. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about some of the choices you'll probably want to make during the character creation process, and then we'll talk about the crops themselves that you're going to want to cultivate and harvest. And finally, we'll discuss how you go about preparing the soil for planting and then the harvesting process itself. So thank you guys very much for joining me for this tutorial series. There's a link to the many other tutorial videos I've got, and I hope you'll subscribe to the channel for more Unreal World content in the future. So with that said, let's get started talking about some of the character creation options you'll want to go for. All right, so we're just going to be touching on a couple of points during the character creation process that you'll want to do if you are focused on agriculture. But if you'd like a full tutorial walkthrough on how to create a character here in the Unreal World, I do have a video for that. In fact, it's the very first video in the tutorial playlist. So check out the description for that link if you need that. But like I said, we're just going to be talking about a few choices which will weigh on whether or not your character comes out as a good farmer or not. So the first one is probably the culture that you're going to choose. Now there are three that I would be looking at mainly. That's the Koivula, the Sartola, and the Remi. So the Koivula and the Sartola start with 2 extra points in the agricultural skill. So no matter what you choose, whether it's easy, too easy, custom, you will go into that skills page with a little bit of a bonus in agriculture if you choose the Koivula or the Sartola. Now the Remi don't have as big of a bonus in agriculture, it's just a 1-point bonus there, but they do get a bonus in herb lore as well, so they're a bit more balanced in the plants and herb lore skills. But like I say, if you want the best, the highest weighting for agriculture, go with the Koivula or the Sartola. All right, now in terms of where you put your character to start off with, there's no mention specifically of what area of the world is best for growing, but I would suppose it's probably to the south where the land is a bit flatter, but you can find plenty of flat land up to the north. It is just a lot more mountainous and stuff. But I can tell you that the cultivated crops such as barley, hemp, etc., those can be grown in any of the regions. There are just some herbs and maybe some berries and such which you won't have access to in certain regions. But if we're just focused on what you can grow yourself, don't have to worry too much about the regional, preferably somewhere not by the purple nurples, but that's just a side point. Now, one thing that your crops will be susceptible to is birds and wildlife. So the wiki says that crows, hares, and even deer specifically, which apparently love turnips, can come into your area and eat up your crops while they're still growing before you have a chance to harvest them. So it is recommended that you use trap fences to wall off your gardens, and maybe even tie up a dog nearby it, a nearby tree if possible. So that's one thing to consider for protecting your crops. All right, now let's talk about some of the crops here in the Unreal World that you'll be wanting to cultivate. I should mention first of all that the wiki does say that a character cannot survive solely on plants alone in the Unreal World, and that you will need some fish or some meat to supplement in your diet for those necessary nutrients like fat and protein. But I have been told by some commenters on past videos that it is possible to survive with some plants. I don't know if that's true from firsthand experience, but I think that certainly with some of the mods that are available, which add certain recipes, such vegetarian recipes, it might certainly be possible. But it definitely sounds like an interesting challenge to try that out, but I can't guarantee that it won't end miserably. But nonetheless, let's focus on some of the food crops that you're going to be wanting to cultivate. First, there are the cereals like barley and rye that can ultimately be ground up into a flour and then baked into bread or some other kinds of recipes as well. So those are going to be very valuable for you. In addition, you've got some vegetables like broad beans, peas, and turnips. and those are all very valuable for you as well. Then you've got things like hemp and flax. Now, they're both edible too, but they also provide you with some sort of textiles that you might need if you want to make cordage and things of that nature. So that's kind of a list of the cultivated crops that you can acquire here in the Unreal world. And one quick tip I'll note here too, if you don't start off with the farming scenario, or even if you do, but you want to get access to some crops maybe you don't have or you need more of, then if we look at the world map, come over to an area where there's a settlement nearby. Don't go directly to the settlement and try and pick some of their plants because they'll get upset about that. But as long as you're not actually inside of the buildings, you're okay. And if you come to some spaces around here, like where I've got my shelter, you can see these are essentially just fields that they've dug up and burned out for you. And in a lot of cases, they've left plants here behind. So there's some broad beans here. These are just growing wild. We've got a patch of hemp here too. So like I said, there's a veritable gold mine of cultivated plants if you just stop by one of the villages, but don't go too close to them. All right, and just a final note on the different crops you can cultivate. There are some herbs which you can also collect seeds from and cultivate as well, such as yarrow and nettle. There's a full list on the wiki there too, and a lot of those have healing properties as well. So if you want to grow yourself some nettle as a source of healing and not necessarily as food, that might be advisable as well. All right, and the final note about the crops is when to grow them. So, even though these crops are not region specific, you do have to pay attention to the timing at which you plant them, and then, of course, when you harvest them. And if you leave plants to wither for too long, ultimately they can become unharvestable. So, it's important to stay close to home and watch the calendar, which, by the way, there is a great calendar on the wiki that gives you a listing of all the months as they're labeled in the Unreal world here. And you can see one of the most important things to note up in the user interface is what's known as the fallow month. So each one of the growing periods or months essentially has a certain name to it, which are all listed on that wiki page and will help guide you to when you should be planting certain crops. Now, I will just say that if you start your character in the spring or summer, you should be able to plant at least some variety of things, especially if you start in early spring. But it can be pretty cold early spring too. So if you're not totally, unaccustomed to the game, be careful with those spring starts. But like I say, as long as you're not starting in the fall or winter, you should still be able to plant. And if you're really good and you get into a really good rhythm, apparently there are some crops like the turnips that you can get a double harvest from if you're right on the timing with those planting and harvesting. But anyway, guys, that's enough about the crops themselves. So let's talk now about how to actually prepare the soil. All right, guys, so we are here at the final section, going to talk about preparing the soil. So, just as any good primitive farmer probably knows, you can't just plant seeds in the ground. You've got to prepare that soil a little bit, especially if you're not able to go out to your local hardware store and grab the big bag of Miracle Grow. So what we're going to do is actually light some fires on this ground. Now, again, the whole process is listed on the wiki if you guys forget. You can also, of course, just rewind the video and go through it here with me, but I've prepared several different little patches here. Now, one thing I will note is I mentioned building a fence earlier around your gardens. You better do the fence after you've burned it, or at least leave yourself one space between that fence and the actual patch of ground you'll be preparing. And especially don't do a little garden up next to your cabin, because these fires will spread. And with any luck, I'll just have to light these once and give it a little bit of time, and they'll spread, to the other squares here. Like I said, they'll be extremely careful about setting these fires. Oh, we failed that time. Near any constructed stuff. So, yeah, if I just sit and allow time to pass a little bit, let's see. Do we get any fire spreading? No, we don't. They didn't spread that much. But no big deal. We might have to encourage them by doing a full line of fires like this. I think that might be working best here. And these are just stacks of 5 firewoods And I think I used stacks of 20 branches down here. Yeah, that's essentially what I've got. Little stacks of 20 branches. They'll both work, I believe, as long as the fire's lit and you get some ash on the ground. That's the important part. Now, like I said, once you've got the ashy spot here, what you're wanting, the next step is to open up your agricultural options menu, which again is the Alt plus A button. And we're going to want to prepare the soil. Now, for this step, you're going to need a shovel. Agriculture can't be done without a shovel. But luckily, if you do start with the farmer scenario, I've made a character twice now using that scenario, and both times our character has started with the shovel in addition to some seeds. But if you don't start with a shovel, you can always make a wooden shovel as long as you have an axe and a knife. But it'd probably just take you a little longer than it would if you had a metal shovel. But let's go ahead and prepare the soil here. Yes, there it is, our shovel. Okay, now you can see that the ground has changed slightly. There's a different looking texture to it versus this over here. Let's just go ahead and perform that action again. I can repeat it. There we go. Now, unfortunately, you can't plant the seeds right away, though. Oh, look at this. The fire has spread to these bushes right here. Well, it does spread. We've confirmed it. Yeah, in fact, you can see that this line of fire spread to the center. So don't just rely on one fire. Try and start like a whole column, and it should spread. Just depends on how ambitious you get with the size of your garden. But you can see I'm trying to keep it fairly modest here. But anyway, like I was saying, you can't plant your seeds immediately. And if you try to, if you go in here to the options again and hit plant sow, it says that the ground is still very warm. You can't plant sow anything before it cools down. The wiki says you need to let it sit for a day. So let's go ahead and have a little rest. And in the morning, we'll try and plant it and see what happens. Alrighty, well, I tell you what, the wiki says that it takes a day or so for this ground to cool off. It's definitely at least 2 days. It takes a while, but as long as you keep coming back, try that plant sow command, and let's go ahead and try it now. I think we're ready to go. So if we bring up our agricultural options again, go to the plant sow command. There we go. So it brings up the list of seeds and grains we've got in our inventory. And we do have knowledge of all of these. You can see the names are listed here. But again, I'll mention, even if you don't know, if it just says like whimsical or funny or fuzzy or whatever funny adjective they put on there, you can still plant, harvest, and stockpile them until you learn what it is. But let's go ahead and try some peas. How about that? So we'll plant peas in this location. Now you can see down here in the bottom it says, okay, you planted a patch of pea here. Time will tell how many will sprout. So you can apparently go back, day after day and just watch your crops grow. Or, like I said, go to the calendar and check and see when peas will be harvested, after you've put them in the ground. But let's try a couple of more just to see if we can do some different ones at different times. Yep, there's some barley just went in the ground there. Some clayweed seeds. All right, very good. Broad beans in addition to the peas. Some rye grains, delicious. We'll do some nettle down here. All right, so that's just about everything. Yes, very nice. And if you're wondering where I got all these seeds, this was what my character started with when you do that farmer playthrough. I can't remember what the name of the scenario is called, but yeah, so you get this plus the shovel, as I mentioned. But there we go. So that kind of covers how to prepare the ground and then plant the seeds. Now we've got one last thing to talk about, and that is harvesting. In addition, threshing in order to acquire more seeds if you want to continue with that crop. So let's see if we can't find some crops to go and harvest here in the wild. All right, and so for the harvesting discussion, we are here in a patch of wild nettle, and of course the wild stuff is treated just like the cultivated stuff in terms of harvesting, so you don't have to worry about that. Now, if we were to just walk up to a bunch of this and stand on top and pick it, we would end up with some nettle leaves, which are no good. I mean, you can eat them, of course, and use them for or medicinal purposes, but we can't thresh them for seeds or grains depending on what you're picking. So we actually need to go into our agriculture options, of course using Alt plus A, and you want to do harvest and pick. Harvest down is the same thing except it just leaves it on the ground. Harvest and pick will put it into your inventory. Now, it is something I'm having trouble getting the hang of is you don't actually stand on top of the crop that you want to do this for. This is one of those options where you're actually going to choose a direction. So luckily I'm just going to choose the nettle bunch that is just to the south of my character there. All right, there you go. You can see we picked up 3 nettles. Let's do that again to this one. There we go. So we've picked a couple of batches. You can see it completely removes the plant. So next year you're going to need to prepare the soil again and replant it. But of course you'll need seeds for that. So if we take a look at our inventory, now you see it just says nettles, not nettle leaves. And it is separated from foods. It's under the plants category here in the inventory. So what we want to do is drop these nettles on the ground. Unfortunately, I don't believe you can thresh from your inventory, but there they are. You can see they kind of resemble the plant itself, but they're laying down. And now we're going to go back to the agricultural options and hit thresh. There we go, and we can see the progress bar was completed. It doesn't put it into your inventory. It's still sitting on the ground, but if I go to pick it up, now we've got nettle seeds, nettle leaves, and nettle straw. So yes, you can see that harvesting and then threshing is much better than just trying to pick the plants. That is the way to go. So there you go, guys. That's just our little demonstration for harvesting. Very straightforward. You're probably going to have a few failures, and the variability of the crop yield is also very, very great too. So sometimes you get a lot, sometimes you might get a little. It's not necessarily due to anything you've done wrong, but that's just how the game is. But anyway, guys, I hope you've learned something from today's tutorial. Let me know what you think down in the comments section. And of course, for you veterans out there, if I missed anything, please leave a comment. And anybody who's new, let me know if there's another subject you'd like to see a tutorial video made for. And I appreciate you guys tuning in. I will see you all on the next one.